Tim, we're back for another episode of Varsity360, and wow, we have a lot of football to talk about. First of all, thanks. We're coming to you from the First Pacific Financial Studio, but I want to start by asking you a very important question.
Hit me.
So have you been to the new In-N-Out in Ridgefield yet?
I have, actually. I hadn't. I think when it originally opened, my plan wasn't I was going to go for like a couple of weeks, let the hysteria die down and go at like 1 o'clock on a Wednesday or something. But the first weekend after it opened on a Wednesday, my wife and I, we went to we did a anniversary trip to Leavenworth, and my wife was going, which way are we going to Leavenworth? Are we going up I-5 into the Seattle area and across to Snoqualmie Pass, or are we going up the backside through Yakima? I said, oh no, we're going to through the backside through Yakima. She said, I just thought if we were going the other way, we could go to In-N-Out. This was like Friday, 2 days after it opened. I was like, no, that's fine. We're not going. We're not going. And then we came back, and I came back sort of the scenic route where we came back through Ellensburg and then into Sela and then across 12 to White Pass and crossed over. And so we came back that way, and I went, let's take a look. And it wasn't so bad. We parked and we walked and we got in line. It was a 15-minute wait to get to order and a 15-minute wait from the order to get your food. It was half an hour, and we picked it up and then went home. So it was all good.
See, for me, I've had In-N-Out in California when we visited, and good burger, not something I'd wait an hour and a half for, but that's something that my daughter would wait an hour and a half for. She's 16. She and her friends planned their whole Saturday around it, went through the drive-through line, took an hour and a half, but they had a plan. They brought their iPad, and while they were waiting, they watched High School Musical. But again, you do you, if that's what you want to do. But must be weird. You grew up in Southern California. It must be weird seeing everybody go crazy for this thing that kind of was like normal down there.
Yeah, it's, I grew up with In-N-Out. And so for me, having one now so close is kind of like, it's kind of bittersweet a little bit. I always liked the fact that it was a little bit of an effort to get to, because then it makes it kind of special. So for me, In-N-Out, going to In-N-Out is always feels like going home in a little bit. And so, but even so, I don't know that I would wait 90 minutes for anything. If somebody told me, hey, wait in this line for 90 minutes, I'll give you $50, and I'd go, yeah, I don't think I need to do that, But, hey, different strokes for different folks, I guess, Yeah,
well, I guess it's be like if you grew up here and moved out of the area and suddenly Burgerville was opening right down the road. But,
sure. Yeah, it's going to be completely weird when they open up the one over here in East Vancouver. They've already broken ground on that on Mill Plain 136. I can't even imagine what the chaos that's going to create.
Yeah, traffic nightmares. At least at the new spot in Ridgefield, you have basically a gravel parking lot where you can almost tailgate to get your burgers and fries.
I also don't know if that's very helpful to have an In-N-Out like 4 miles from my house, because I don't think I've ever, even when I was growing up in Southern California, it was always over in the San Fernando Valley, which was like a half an hour trip to go get to one. That's gonna be weird. I don't know if that's gonna be healthy for me or not.
Yeah, but anyway, let's that's the pressing discussion. But let's talk some football, because gosh, if week 1 of the high school football season is any indication, this season is going to be crazy.
Yeah, there was wild games. I think we were talking about this back at the office, and I had the same reaction that you had. I was like, I was out at Ridgefield, and Scott Rice, the Ridgefield coach, is on the sideline to me. He goes, hey, if you were hoping for a good game tonight, you found one. And I was like, yeah, it's like you always feel lucky sometimes when you get a good game, because oftentimes you go cover games and it's lopsided or something. And I kind of had the same feeling, like I got the good game of the night, and it turns out that we sent 4 different staffers, and they all had great games, crazy games, wild games.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I come back and I'm thinking, wait till they hear about my game. I was out at McKenzie for the nightcap. Obviously, if you followed our coverage, everything with the controversy with Union and Evergreen and how that game ended. But yeah, I walk in and I was like, God, I had a banger. It's like, whoa, Tim's game was a banger too. And then, whoa, Columbia River beats Seton Catholic. Will was there. That must have been exciting. And Jeff, who hasn't been a regular part of our rotation, but is now, we sent him out to La Center, and he gets a 1-point game that comes down to the wire. And
even one of our correspondents was out at Woodland for Woodland Kalama, which was decided by a last-second field goal. So, it was just like, there were great games all over. And it's always interesting in week one because that's where you get kind of figure out what we got. Like a lot of these week one matchups that we had this year are the exact same ones last year, but the outcomes were just wildly different from last year. And so it kind of like, last year, a lot of these games that we covered, the same matchups were kind of one-sided. And now there are all these great games that kind of like sets a table that, okay, maybe this season this is going to be the norm.
Well, I want to go more into the Evergreen Union issue with that call, the field goal, of course, that Union and certainly a lot of people in the stadium thought was good. That was called no good, and obviously kind of the fallout from that. But before we go into that, I just want to ask, what do you think was the biggest surprise of this past week?
The biggest surprise for me out of all the results, it was Columbia River and Seton Catholic. I was talking with our friend Paul Valencia on Thursday at Mackenzie, and I said, "Where were you going tomorrow?" And he goes, I'm going to go out to Seton Catholic. They're the state runner-ups, and Camas was on the road in week one, so I'll go out and give them coverage. It probably won't be a really great game, but I'll go out anyway. And it turns out it was a good game, and River came out victorious on that. So I think it just kind of shows, again, it's this week one swing from one year to the next, that teams in high school football, they just change from year to year, and that's going to produce different results. Last year, I think the Seton won that game something like 56-6 or something like that. Seton came up with I think at least 3 interceptions, and I think one they returned for a touchdown. This year, Seton River comes out and says, hey, we're going to run this wing tee, we're going to run the ball, and we're just going to keep it on the ground, we're going to grind it out. And they broke some big plays early on and sort of set the tempo. They got out front, whereas last year they fell behind and then had to play a game that wasn't their style. Now they got to set the tempo. And then Seton had to come back late, and they did come back late, and they got within a touchdown here in the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game and couldn't overtake it. So just a great win for Coach Patterson's program, and a great kickstart for the Rapids, especially since their week 2 game is off the books now, because they were supposed last year they played Columbia White Salmon, but they're playing an independent schedule, so they're going to be at Oahu this week. And now River doesn't have a week 2 game. We kind of thought going into the season that was going to be a big bummer because they were going to play this week 1 game against Seton, and it probably wasn't going to go well, and then they're going to have a bye week, and then they start league play. But now they got a really exciting first win, and they get to process that and heal up any bumps and get ready for league play. It's kind of a bitter situation for them.
Well, I think you and I have been doing this long enough and written enough preseason team previews that we kind of get a little bit jaded when, we talk to a coach. It's like, oh, how's your team going to be? And it's like, oh yeah, guys are bought in and we're going to do this, we're going to be much improved in this area. And then a lot of times we've seen that doesn't really come true. But every now and then the coaches are right. And I think what we saw is that Columbia River is completely bought into this wing tee scheme that Coach Patterson has put in. They're playing to their strengths, and a team that's kind of been in the backwater of the 2A Greater St. Helens League in recent years, kind of in that 5th, 4th, congratulations, you get to go up and play Tumwater in week 10. Kind of, the Rapids might be something that, teams are going to have to take seriously this year.
Yeah, that's the other thing about week 1 every year. It's kind of like week 1, you're trying to assess, is team A really good, or is team B not quite as good as we thought, or some combination of it? Is it like 70-30? Is it 50-50 or whatever? And so week 2 kind of gives a little bit more clarity to that, but certainly a great first start for River. And, I can remember them last year. They had some injury problems last year. I can remember I went to watch them play against Hawkinson. It was probably middle of the season. And I remember watching them when they ran the ball, they did pretty well. And then when they threw the ball, it's when they kind of had problems. And so I think they kind of said, no, we're going to do this. We're going to do this run game. This is where our strength is. And they got healthy bodies back in that, so they can run that. And so, I think it's just a big reward for the work that those kids have put in. And for Seton, there's a lot of new pieces to their system, and they lost a lot of really good graduating seniors, from Jacob Williams to Joe Colorame to Riker Ruelas. Teddy Wishorik was a receiver. He's going to focus on baseball this year, so he's not back. They had a couple other players leave the program for other programs in the area. So there's a lot of new pieces, and I think with a system like what Seton runs, it's going going to take a little time to build that cohesiveness in again. I think the team they had last year, they were just able to hit the ground running in week one, And so it's going to take a little while. And so it'll be interesting to see how they react coming into week two. They play two 2A Greater St. Helens leagues in their non-league, River and Mark Morris. I think going into the season, we kind of thought that Mark Morris would be the tougher of the two matchups. We'll find out if that's true in week two. We'll find out whether Seton kind of, make some changes, make some tweaks. It kind of looked like from the highlights that I saw on Friday that just kind of took them a little while to get going. Mm-hmm. So, if they get a good start, Mark Morris is coming off a 19-6 loss to Kelso, but a game in which the Monarchs outgained the Highlanders and got more first downs. They just couldn't finish with points. And so I'm sure there are a lot of frustration out there at Mark Morris from that week one game, and they're going to look to right that in week two.
Well, one of the more interesting settings, I think, for week two will once again be Mackenzie Stadium, because you've got Union taking on Woodville and Evergreen taking on Puyallup. And for me, these matchups are more interesting based on what happened Friday. Evergreen, I think all of us picked them as the favorite in the 3A Greater St. Helens League. They, obviously won that league last year, have dudes all over the field, a quarterback entering his second year as a starter, although he's just a sophomore. Union struggled last year. They went 2-6, but we knew that they'd be better, I think, because of, the system that Coach Steve Pine runs. And boy, was that on display. I was very impressed by a lot of things Union did on Friday night, but everything gets overshadowed by the way that game ended in regulation. Union thinking it had kicked the field goal that won them the game, and the officials kind of look at each other and go, no, and Union celebrating like they won. Evergreen's actually kind of hanging their heads thinking they lost, and the next thing you know, we're playing overtime.
Yeah, that, I wrote about it in my column this week, and you can find it on 360preps.com, and I also have a video where I kind of break things down a little bit about that game, and also a couple other games that had some close calls too. Just a really unfortunate situation. It's the video replay from the Evergreen Public Schools broadcast feed. It was really hard to tell whether that went over, because all you see is this black blob of a football going over this goalpost with this black blob background, and it was very difficult to see. But your video from the sideline, it was very clear, and then you go in and you slow it down, and you can just see the ball going over the crossbar, and it's just hard to sort of figure out what the officials saw, because what you said there on the field, the reactions of 22 players were all their body English was saying the same thing, that it was good and the game was over. And actually, it's kind of interesting that when you watch the video, the Evergreen players are actually walking away back to the sidelines, and they have to be notified by their teammates who are on the sidelines. They're the ones who seeing the officials going no good, and they're telling them, and it's kind of like they're like, what? Just an unfortunate situation on that. It's kind of like, I just think maybe the vantage point, the kick was a wobbler, it was a line drive, and it goes over the bar at a split second. It's like a split moment, like the bullet going right on over. And I think on a kick like 23 yards like that, I think what the refs are looking for, they're both standing up underneath both of the uprights, and they're looking for a kick that's going to go high and whether or not it's going to cross over, because that's usually the most controversial thing on a field goal is the post, the uprights are not as tall as they are in the pros or in college. And so you have to get underneath and you have to watch whether or not it went left or right. Well, this one just kind of went right over the crossbar, and I just think maybe they didn't see it. Again, a black ball and a black background, maybe the stadium lights or something got, glare or something. And the one ref looks to the other ref, and the other ref looks back, and a lot of times too, refs will signal to each other, do a little hand, like, they'll sit there and go, I got a catch on that. And they'll go, yeah. And they'll go, yes, catch. There wasn't any of that. They just kind of both looked at each other, and then the one on the left kind of goes, no good. I think you were making a point back at the office.
Yeah,
it's kind of like
they defaulted to it because I don't think either of them had a definitive look that it was good. And it was ironic because in this case, where the ball is just screaming right over here and you're right underneath that crossbar, the two gentlemen tasked with making the call probably have the worst vantage point in the stadium. Like you said, they're looking, does it go left or right of the upright? But this thing comes out just like a 2-iron, just like, low, and if it, it clears the crossbar by maybe a foot, if not 6 inches. And so, probably if you're 10 or 15 yards behind the goalpost or in front of the goalpost, you're going to see from the depth perspective, that definitely went over. But if you're right under that crossbar, you don't get that vantage point. And so it's unfortunate and ironic that the call was made from probably the most inconclusive vantage point that you could put.
There's an Evergreen player like right on the goal line. And he turns and he looks over and he sees it go over the bar and he kind of goes like that. So he probably had a great vantage point. There's a guy, like a ball guy for Union, behind the goalpost, and he sees it comes over and he grabs the ball and he celebrates because he's got a good vantage point, because that's where you can kind of see that height. But from right underneath, I mean, most field goals, they go up, they kind of up, over, and you can kind of track it. But when it comes out like a bullet like that, it's a split-second decision, and it's just, I mean, really, the referee might have even had the best vantage point because he's back where the kicker. He probably had the best vantage point. So I don't know that they, maybe kind of didn't get together and sort of, because somebody would have said, it looked pretty good to me. Are you sure?
Yeah. And
I don't think the guys behind on the upright were sure. And I think the point was that you were making earlier back at the office is like, they defaulted to no good because then the game gets to continue and the kids get to decide who wins the game, as opposed to guessing good or no good, saying, yes, it's good, and the game's over, and then you later find out that you're wrong, and then you were the one deciding the game. So I think there was maybe some of that in play. It's a tough thing. And like I say in my column, mistakes happen in week one.
Right.
Mistakes, players drop balls, they fumble, they, run the wrong route. Coaches will, make mistakes about clock management or substitutions or what play they call. Officials will make mistakes. Mistakes happen week one. That's what week one is all about. It's about fixing mistakes, learning from mistakes, moving forward. I'm sure the Evergreen Officials Association are going to be looking at this, talking about this, and trying to figure out mechanics to avoid something like this happening in the future.
Well, yeah, even when I talked to Union coach Steve Pine afterwards, he was like, hey, we made 4 turnovers.
Right.
Like if we had executed earlier in the game, it probably doesn't even come down to that. So yeah, I'm really excited to see kind of how Union dusts itself off and comes back against Woodinville, a team that traditionally has been pretty good from up in the Seattle area. And I'm kind of excited to see how Evergreen goes against a Puyallup team that you mentioned our walk over here. Oh, did you see, by the way, they beat Tumwater?
They beat Tumwater 24-19. So, I mean, Tumwater is a 2A school. Puyallup's a 4A school. But again, Tumwater is Tumwater, and every year they have a good program. And so a win over Tumwater week one is a good win. I think we knew coming in that Puyallup was going to be one of the better 4A teams in the state. Last year they beat Evergreen up in Puyallup something like 37-13 or something like that. It's going to be a big test for Evergreen. They're going to need to kind of get things figured out earlier. I think last week it was Union's game to win for about three and a half quarters, and then the last half of that fourth quarter, Evergreen kind of found itself, and then they continued that into the overtime. I think that's the reason why Coach Steve Pine went for 2 in the he's kind of feeling like that things are trending towards Evergreen's favor in this overtime period. So let's go and win this game right here, right now. Also, it's a week 1 game. Mm-hmm. It's week 1. It's a non-league. It's not going to determine whether you go to the playoffs or not. 10 years ago, week 1 games didn't matter at all, and now they kind of matter a little bit.
For seeding.
You're right, because there's the seeding at the end of this year, and teams looking by and go, well, I don't know, this team's 7-2 instead of 6-3 instead of 7-2. They might seed you differently or something like that. But I think the biggest thing for Union going into this game with against Woodinville, and Woodinville lost. No, Woodinville, I think they lost to Timberline last week. Timberline's a 3A school that's coming off a 1-9 season. So kind of looks like this is a matchup. Last year Union went up to Woodinville and lost handily. I think this is now maybe perhaps a matchup that that Union can compete and win. if they can build off what their successes were. I think the message to the Titans coming in is like, hey, you guys did everything that you were supposed to do to win that game. You should be feeling like you played a winning game.
Well, and
the circumstances just didn't work out in your favor.
They possessed the ball so well. They have a long drive to open the second quarter. One mistake, it gets intercepted, taken back 97 yards for a touchdown by Evergreen. Union then has another long drive that they take down to the very end of the first half. They score a touchdown with like 10 seconds. And then they open the third quarter, taking the kickoff, and run 6 minutes off the clock. So for 18 minutes of game time, Evergreen's offense ran one play from scrimmage.
Yeah, that's one way to slow down Evergreen is keep them off the field. So
yeah. And anyway, again, everyone's talking about, my social media mentions were blowing up. People, mostly from the Union side, talk about how they got robbed, but a lot that you can take if you're the Titans to say like, hey, we're headed and trending in the right direction. But what about your game? Prairie and Ridgefield, not lacking for offense. And I think we both had questions, kind of Prairie looks pretty good. Ridgefield's putting in this new offense. Both of those teams have got some things working.
When Scott Rice talked to me on the sideline, he said, if you were hoping to get a good game, you got one. And then he added, it didn't look like it was going to be early on, and it didn't, because Prairie, first play of the game, Devin Vishu goes 80 yards for a touchdown, and they score, and then they get the ball back and they score another touchdown. They go up 14-0, and then the Spudders come back. They get it cut back to 14-13, but eventually, Prairie, every time they had the ball, they were doing something. They were scoring, and they got up 30-19 by halftime, and they really kind of felt like, even though it was only an 11-point difference, that the fact that just Prairie was just moving, that it was going to be hard to catch. Richfield played better defense in the second half. They were able to tie the game at 30, tie the game again at 38. And then we had, 2 touchdowns scored in the last 75 seconds, Prairie scores to go up 46-38. Richfield comes down and they score with it didn't even take very long. It was like 40 seconds left. And then they went for 2 and were unsuccessful on their last 2-point conversion, so they lost 46-44. Wild game, back and forth, a lot of offense. Both teams' coaches were probably thinking, we got something to work on defense here. So it's going to set up for an interesting week 2. Prairie is back at home at District Stadium. They're going to host Washougal, which put up 56 points against Mountain View. So there's some ability there for the Panthers to score points. Mm-hmm. And shoring up the defense is something that the Panthers are going to, Prairie's going to want to do against the Panthers. And then likewise, Ridgefield is going to be up against Mountain View, who's got a quarterback who threw for almost 500 yards last week. So something for actually that's Mountain View Battleground. I'm getting that wrong. So Ridgefield is actually going to Montesano. That's what they're doing. Again, Montesano beat La Center in a good game, and it's a road game, tough game up there. So a little different offensive setup for them. So, Spudders don't want to start going into league play 0-2. So it's going to be a good test for them to rebound as well. But I think there was a lot of good things for both teams to come out of that game, a lot of positives from it. Devin Vishu is a dynamic runner, passer. They've got a lot of different options. And Ridgefield was coming out from this wing set, but they still were throwing the ball, especially in the second half when they were behind and able to move the ball quickly, but they also had success running the ball with a couple different running backs. So I think, it was an exciting game, and both of these teams showed some potential.
Well, when I'm looking ahead to this Friday's games, my eyes immediately went to Prairie Washougal. I was actually at that game last year where Prairie won with a late touchdown pass. It was Junior Miller's first win since taking over as head coach at Prairie. But it was a kind of last year it was a little bit of a sloppy game, sort of. On the low scoring end. I think they were in their 20s, both of the teams with point totals. But coming off of this year where Washougal, I think we kind of knew they'd be a lot better, and boy, did they show that on Thursday to kick off the season. And then Prairie putting up the points that they did with some of their playmakers that we knew that they would have coming in. It's like, this could be a real shootout on Friday.
It could be. So again, you don't always know from week one. It's like, was it Washougal's offense or was it Mountain View's defense or a combination of the two? And the same thing goes back to the other game too. So, obviously there are things that Prairie wants to work on and get better defensively. They're going to see a team in Washougal that does things as well as that Ridgefield was doing. They were able to run the ball and get some good plays, but also get some good passes and get the ball out in space for the playmakers to make plays. And then they had some really good in the return game. I think it's DeAndre Goodall had a kickoff return, had a nice punt return. So a lot of weapons, a lot of ways to score, which is the one thing the Panthers struggled last year. They defended heavily on their defense to win games. Having some offensive options there will liven up. It should be a very exciting. I think it's going to be an interesting game to kind of see what do we learn from week one. We'll know for sure in week two, or at least we'll know better.
Yeah, I think we have this tendency to do like week one overreactions because it's the first sample size we really have, or it's not just speculative. It's like, okay, now we see how things came together on the field, and we tend to gravitate toward what we saw versus what might develop, going forward. Because certainly, Washougal's a perfect case. Like, they started off kind of, not really being able to score very, very much early in the season last year. By week 5, they were, getting ready to run off 4 in a row and eventually make the postseason. And so, it's kind of a good reminder that every season's a work in progress, and you are not defined by what happens week 1.
Yeah, I'm sure Coach Dave Hajak's looking for Washougal going, hey, we gave up nearly 500 yards passing to Mountain View week 1. Although that comes with a grain of salt. Mountain View was able to hit some deep passes. They were able to get behind Washougal defenders and hit some deep, long receptions, long touchdowns in the first half, and then a lot of the yards that were accumulated there were accumulated in the second half, when Washougal had already built like a 3 or 4 touchdown lead. So there was a lot of garbage time yards in there too. So again, you got to process all to the situation of the game. So it'll be interesting to see Washougal playing in a game perhaps that'll be competitive throughout, and they've got to respond, they got to make stops, they got to do all these kind of things. And they're going to face a different kind of a quarterback in Devin Bijou this week than they saw last week. So
yeah, well, let's touch on one of the other close games. Woodland gets the win over Kalama. I got it. This was a low scoring one. Again, decided on a field goal on the last play of the game. I get the sense that this might be how Woodland wins games with their defense.
Yeah, it kind of they're going to lean on that defense. Keep the games close, keep the games short. They scored 16 points. One of their touchdowns was Will Clemens returning a kickoff return. That happened, I think, in the third quarter, and then they ended up missing the PAT. That's why the score was 14-13 at the end, and then Josiah Graham with the short field goal to win it at the buzzer to make it win 16-14. So, they're going to try to, control the clock, play good defense, keep themselves in the game the whole way through, and make some plays when they need to make some plays to score. So it'll be interesting. Again, week 2 we get to kind of learn a little bit more, right? So that's what they did against Kalama. Where's Kalama right now compared to where La Center is right now? Woodland La Center playing at La Center. We get to see where both those teams are again in a week 2. I think that should be another really interesting matchup, Woodland and La Center.
Yeah, because obviously La Center had its own close call, falling just short, losing 20-19 to Montesano, a team that the Wildcats have become very familiar with over the last couple of years, facing them twice last year. But everything's a work in progress. I think La Center has an injury or two they're going to have to find a way to work around, but that begins this Friday against Woodland.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Coach John Lambert, he likes challenges in the preseason. He likes to, they win when they had a bye week open up from the Columbia schedule opening. They went and got Napavine, a top 2B school, and then Napavine played well in week 1. So, so they played Monty, and then they're going to play Woodland, and then I think week 3 is Napavine. good challenges to get them ready for the Trico League play, and so it'd be interesting to see again how they sort of respond, because it's kind of like both teams, Woodland and the Center, kind of ended up on the wrong side of the same kind of game. Tough battle, defensive, and I think La Center missed a field goal late in their game against Monty. So how do teams respond and react to those week one results, and how they respond and come back and play well in week two?
Well, can week two measure up to week one with drama? I don't know. But like you said, every week brings its own different highlights, its own different twists, its own different elements that we can learn from to kind of see where teams are at. And so, like you said, there'll be plenty to talk about. There already is plenty to talk about, but we're going to make sure to do it right here on Varsity 360.